Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Sturm. I'm part of the strategy team here at Capillary Technologies. As background, Capillary is, we like to say we're on the leading edge of providing innovative technology solutions for both the loyalty and the customer experience industry, which are colliding greatly together today and becoming one. As we all know, loyalty, CRM programs, customer experience initiatives have been highly successful in the traditional business to consumer industries, and more recently have become really critical and important strategic initiatives in the B2B industry, and especially for CPG and manufacturing type companies, as they strive to build direct relationships with their end customer or consumer. So our session today focuses on the CPG industry and building these direct-to-consumer relationships. One administrative note, this is a live session. It'll be a panel format. I'll introduce our panelists in a second, but if you have questions, please put them into chat and we'll answer them closer to the end of the session, and we'll also take questions live from anyone attending. So let's get to it. Joining us on the panel are three folks who I consider industry leaders and subject matter experts around CPG and direct-to-consumer. So first, Sucharita Kodali, who's a part of the Forrester organization and is one of their industry analysts who I've known for a while and is highly respected in the industry. Lance Patrick, I've met recently, but he is a strategy and analytics leader working for General Mills. And Justin Richie, who's the Chief Data Officer for Capillary. And I'm primarily going to help make sure we're getting questions in and facilitate questions, but let me introduce Stacy Ross. So Stacy is going to facilitate the discussion, and Stacy leads our consumer experience and loyalty strategies for Capillary here in North America. So Stacy, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jim. To begin our session today, the CPG industry and consumer buying behaviors have changed dramatically over the past few years, which has created really a huge opportunity for CPG and manufacturing brands. Let's take a look at some best practices followed by top CPG brands to drive direct-to-consumer sales. Sucharita, what are you seeing as some of the winning strategies and best practices followed by CPG brands to enable a seamless D2C relationship and sales?
Well, a lot of the success in DTC comes down to a lot of the age-old things that drive success in any type of technical investment. It is the old people, process, technology adage, but let me kind of go through each of those. From a people standpoint, the organizational structure needs to be aligned to support DTC. And that's often where I see a lot of CPGs stumbling, is that they may not have the executive support, they may not have sales support. And if you don't have the entire organization allying behind DTC, what ends up happening is that you either tend to prefer marketplaces, or you prefer, kind of other forms of traditional distribution. You may not, which isn't a bad thing, but the challenge is that some of that distribution often is rogue, and that often holds back DTC. So there's that piece, which is the org structure part of it. Then there is, the processes. You see so many CPGs not having all of their data in one place. They may not have digital assets that are necessary to drive success. They may not have workflows set up to ensure that the content that appears on a direct-to-consumer site is as strong as it can be. I mean, there are no shortage of sites that I could audit, and they will have misspellings on their website. They'll have major photography that is essential to sell the item missing. So if you don't have that, you're not going to set your business up for success. Part of process is also integration with your owned assets. Otherwise, one of the single biggest assets that I say is essential to driving CPG DTC success is promoting that you even have a DTC website on your existing packaging. If people don't know that you are open for sale, who's going to come to your website? You're going to have the same people who are coming 20 years ago, which are basically a handful of investors looking for SEC information, not people looking for product information and having the ability to actually complete transactions there. And then from a tech standpoint, it is having a good e-commerce platform, good order management system, a strong fulfillment, all of the elements of best practices in e-commerce selling that we have mastered for decades now. So it is you don't need to reinvent the wheel there, and there are a lot of great solutions that are second gen, third gen solutions that you can learn from the best and adopt a lot of that. So all of those are key parts, and I still see a lot of companies not always embracing all of that, not always having all of that in place to ensure success.
Thank you. All right, Lance, throughout your career, what best practices have remained sound to drive D2C sales over time? And what practices do you think have become obsolete?
I think what remains sound is a fundamental understanding of the consumer, both their need and their unmet need. And I think that where we are now in 2022, it's both the empathy and really understanding that need, but also marrying that with the data and what the data tells you, because how they're meeting that need is changing. The route to market is changing, but the understanding the need and the unmet need is timeless, especially in consumer packaged goods and the industries with D2C opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for calling out empathy. I think that's a very strong word. And I think, just this past year, we've all experienced quite a bit. So thank you for calling that out. All right, next, let's take a look at some top myths that we've heard about in the CPG industry and a brand's opportunity for direct-to-consumer initiatives. So Sucharita, in an effort to debunk those CPG industry myths, it's important to identify them first. What are the most common myths that exist around the D2C channel in the CPG domain?
Yeah, I think that I'm off mute. There are a handful of myths that are pervasive that I would love to dispel, and I would hope that kind of either people recognize these or kind of they'll seek out some of the data points to help support this as they make their own cases for DTC. First is that people won't come to my site to buy a single item. And I think that is probably myth number one that absolutely needs to be dispelled. You can look at companies ranging from Dollar Shave Club to Nespresso that are all evidence that people will absolutely go to a website to buy a single item. So that is something that absolutely needs to be thought over is, people aren't going to come to my site to buy diapers, or they're not going to come to my site to buy soap, and kind of to the contrary, that is I think that people actually absolutely are in kind of they don't have a bias against it, and there's nothing that is easier in e-commerce shopping than to go to another URL. I think that we've got this bias that everybody wants a one-stop e-commerce shop, and the truth is that there are actually lots of places online that consumers go and purchase, and a CPG destination is as likely to be one of those destinations as any. The second issue is that all sales are the same. So I've heard that from brands before, that we don't care where a sale comes from, like we just want the sale. And actually, au contraire, you actually should care where your sales come from. And your most profitable channel should be your own direct-to-consumer channel, because that is the channel where you're actually capturing all of your margin and presumably some of what would have been retail margin as well. The other big benefit is the first party data. So in addition to it being a higher margin channel, which we can talk about, because I know that CPGs, will hem and haw about, kind of fulfillment. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But, kind of in addition to it being a higher margin channel, it's a data channel. It is your channel to actually get to know your best customers, because who else is going to be buying on your website but your best customers? I know that's another thing about DTC, is that I am never going to be one of those people, especially in CPG, to say, oh, 80% of your sales are going to be coming from this channel. No, that's definitely not the case, but it is reasonable to expect at the very least a high single-digit percent and possibly even a low double-digit percent of your units sold to come through DTC. And if that percent represent some of your best shoppers, your biggest brand advocates, why wouldn't you want to know who they are? Why wouldn't you want to have a one-to-one relationship with them? Why wouldn't you want to use them to seed new products and test what is coming down the pipeline? So those are things that are absolutely essential. And then the other piece is that people, kind of, they don't want to buy from lots and lots of different brands. And I think that one of the myths, or that people prefer to buy from like marketplaces, and we've done a lot of research with consumers asking, well, what are some of your concerns as a shopper that you have with marketplaces, online marketplaces in particular? And a lot of them, and this number is seemingly increasing over time, is that there's a lot of skepticism about the quality of the merchandise, whether or not it's counterfeit, whether or not it is gray market. And a lot of gray market goods have a whole host of issues, like the length of time that the product may have been stored, whether or not it's an expired product, whether or not it's been stored in conditions that don't lead to the optimal usage of that item. And that's especially the case for food and beauty items, where storage conditions are really, really important to ensuring the integrity of that item. So there are a whole number of things that I think that need to be dispelled about, kind of, oh, people won't come and buy on my site for a CPG. And I mean, it's astounding to me, because I feel like, kind of ever since the beginning of the internet, people will have 150 reasons why, oh, people aren't going to buy this product online, and they're not going to buy on this website. And like, I feel like every single year, like, kind of, we dispel these myths. And, with the exception of like silliness, like, oh, people are going to buy through drones, or, kind of, they're going to buy in the metaverse. Every category has, at some point or time shifted online, and every brand has proven to have some kind of a viable, kind of e-commerce option. So I will shut up, because I've been talking for a long time now, but I think that there are a number of myths that hopefully I've dispelled for you, and if not, there will continue to be data out there to support the opportunity for DTC here.
Lance, did you want to add anything to that? I just saw that you came off mute.
No, I think, I think the other one, and you mentioned it, it's not all or nothing. Even if you've chosen to partner for the buy button or chosen to partner for fulfillment, cultivating that relationship is really fundamental for your loyal consumers and the persuadables. And so really understanding how to build those relationships with consumers, because honestly, if you're pitching D2C to your boss's boss and you have nothing, pitching the buy button is going to be a hard sell. But if you've got a relationship with consumers, and then convincing them that they can buy from you and continue to find value in that relationship, so start with the relationship, start with the consumer need, and figure out the buy button and the fulfillment over time.
Just one more thing to tack on to Lance that I really took away from that comment is, Lance said it's not an all or nothing thing, and that couldn't be more true. Nespresso is a great contemporary example that was mentioned earlier, because a lot of our first experiences with Nespresso were in a retail-based environment, and they cultivated that relationship to be a direct to consumer model, and having that as a, think of it more like a customer lifestyle mechanism of evolving the relationship with the customer, not having people dedicated to you right out of the gate, but starting to try your products from your brand and then cultivating that in a more intimate direct to consumer relationship is I've seen a very successful model in the market.
All right, great. So Jim, I just noticed a question. I thought it might be relevant here for this, in that we've talked about, Sucharita going to Nespresso's website. Well, it's interesting, right? So given the mobile first initiatives we're seeing, we have a question here that says, given the importance of mobile apps, is retention a problem and how do you deal with it? So I just wanted to see if you wanted to comment around not just website purchasing, but mobile as well.
I can certainly add my point of view onto that. So there's mobile web and there's mobile app. In general, unless you are getting a ton of frequent visitation, we generally dissuade companies from investing in their own branded mobile app, unless you have something to drive continuous engagement. Most of you are not Instagram, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to invest in a full-on app. There are all sorts of development challenges that can result from that. However, that doesn't mean that you can't borrow other mobile moments and that you should not optimize your content for mobile devices, because we know the majority of traffic now is on mobile. The majority of shopping traffic is on mobile. Conversion is still lower on mobile than it is on a desktop. So you do have to make sure that that commerce experience is relatively strong in every touch point. And rather than focus on things like a mobile app, I would actually encourage CPGs to look at things that are more distributed commerce related, because the ability to help people discover things on a social network like TikTok or Instagram, and to then reduce friction in the purchasing of that single unit, which is actually very, very well suited to social. Those are the kinds of things that I would encourage one to think about and to consider, which is different than traditional retail. Traditional retail has really, really struggled with making, with driving discoverability in social. It's struggled with driving commerce in social. But CPGs are actually, with their shorter messages, with single units, there's an easier story to tell in social, and kind of the trial, the lower price points, there's a lot more that is there that has potential. So I would encourage people to think about that. A lot of it is also going to require different forms of experimentation. In regions like China, things like live selling work really well. We haven't really cracked it in social networks in the United States yet, but that's not a reason to not experiment. Also, we know that it is less likely that you're going to sell through something like an Instagram store. But kind of if you show up in somebody's feed and you have some kind of shoppability where there's a frame that opens up that takes the consumer to your website, that also is likely a more viable way to actually sell. That you get in that stream, the more that you have engagement. So, kind of, I wouldn't necessarily invest in like a store, but you can invest in shoppable links, and then you have to invest in driving traffic to, kind of those social properties. And a lot of that involves really good creative, and, there's no shortcuts to that.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to shift to the next topic here. So the CPG industry has seen seismic shifts in supply and demand, given these technical advancements. So Lance, how do you see supply side and demand side changes impacting the CPG industry recently?
Yeah, the supply side is wild. you don't have to look past any restaurant with guacamole on their menu this week is trying to figure out the supply side. So I really think it's about prioritizing, your product and really being clear on where it's from and why and what that network looks like. But on the demand side, there's a ton of opportunity. If you think about the last 2 years and how work and school and leisure and housing have all evolved, it's a huge opportunity for consumers and to understand needs as they're evolving. So staying open, staying clear on sort of what you're selling and why and who's buying. I think the demand side opportunity is real, and the data opportunity to support that, because we're not going back to 2019. No industry is going back to 2019. 2022, 2023 are going to be different versions and different phases of new normal. And so really understanding consumers and understanding how data can help you adjust to those demands faster and test and learn even before you can test and measure. There's no such thing as perfect data. And if you wait for perfect data, you can retire before you start. But really understanding test and learn, test and measure. So you have those consumer hypotheses to drive the demand side for your benefit. But the supply side, if Forrester or anyone can figure out the supply side, I think they'll be even more successful than they've already been.
Justin, I see you smiling about Lance's comment around retirement and data. Do you have anything to add to that?
I have always said 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And there's a fallacy of making everything so perfectly buttoned up. And by the time you finish it, it's either shifted from industry pressures or people left the organization. It's better to test and validate to extract value as much as possible. Incremental machine learning development is the only path I recommend, because it's very easy to fall in the 7-figure trap of investment when just starting small to find your pockets of opportunity is really where the ROI is going to come from. And that is not just CPG, that is across the board a struggle for many companies. And it's best to start small and evolve with your investment for sure. But thank you for noticing, Stacy.
Yeah, so let's get into the good stuff. So let's shift into data. So Sucharita, not long ago, Forrester coined the terms first, second, third, and zero-party data. Can you please highlight the significance of these and how a CPG company can navigate and unleash the power of customer data?
Well, typically zero-party data we will generally define as a completely opted-in data where the consumer is giving you permission, and they've shared various elements of their background or whatever parameters they want with you. First-party data is it is the data that you own. So it could be data from your website. It could be data from your transactions that you're gleaning. It isn't quite the, it may not be as extensive as that zero-party data where the consumer has given complete, kind of permission. You're kind of assuming permission a little bit more with that first-party data. And then third-party is a lot of that advertising data that we're talking about essentially shutting down and getting less and less of over time. Second-party data is interesting because it's essentially data partnerships where there could be some agreements that the consumer is also aware of, but it's more, kind of some of those fine print agreements. It isn't necessarily as clear cut as some of the zero-party data. But for instance, it could be like a brand, kind of partnering with retailers. A lot of the retailer media networks right now that we're hearing about, that's essentially riding the backs of second-party data. It's data consortiums and data partnerships that enable that to ultimately be true and then be more effective. And ultimately, that's also how measurement is gleaned. So they're all so zero, first, and second party data is where we see some of the biggest opportunities with CPG. And in terms of, even that zero-party data, which is perhaps the most valuable data that is out there, the value for CPGs is that you're attracting your best customers and you're getting information about who they are, what they're interested in. And depending on how well you leverage your relationship with them, you can glean a heck of a lot more information because you can use those people as bases of surveys and focus groups and other insight that historically you've paid people to get. But in this case, they're kind of paying to be part of, and share their insights with you and share what they want you to know about them. And, these are people who often want new products and are willing to give you insight on what new products they would buy. And there's very, very little that I can imagine that would be more useful to any brand manufacturer than that. So there's that level. But also, a lot of brands have talked about using this data to help create lookalike audiences, which will still be there. That's not going to go away. They've used this data to better create new products and manage their product development life cycle. So I think that there are a lot of different ways that brands can take advantage of what you have or what you can now glean, because these are data points that historically brands didn't even really pursue. So it's all new territory. And, Lance and Justin called it out earlier, which is that something's better than nothing. And now, you have not only nothing, not only do you have something, you actually have a lot. And it's more, what do you, which divisions of the company are now going to be empowered to take advantage of what you have that you never had before.
Stacy, could I chime in for a second?
Sure.
So Sucharita mentioned all the types of data, and one of the most powerful weapons is the zero-party data that she was speaking to, because this is where your customers are going to tell you their preferences, their likes, their beliefs, and it is powerful stuff that you can gather. And one of the secret weapons for gathering this data is structured loyalty. So this has been a secret of the loyalty industry for quite a while, because when someone joins a program, they've already signed up that they're willing for you to learn about them. And then if you use a loyalty program as a strategic weapon, you can incent them to complete preference centers, to tell you about themselves. And now you have deep insights that you can use in personalization of communications back to them. So I love the zero party data concept, and loyalty is a secret weapon for gathering it.
I think that the key is to build them in order too. At different times, as you think about a project, and I know, Justin, we've talked about this before, you got to build the squad before you build the scoreboard. And so really focus on the team and building out what you know before you worry about if you're winning or you're losing. That will come. But if you had to make a tech bet on one or the other, I fundamentally believe building the team and building your knowledge and building that data out before you worry about what other people are doing or if you're winning. If you know more about the consumer and how they use your product, how they interact with your brand, and how they buy, you will win. And the scoreboard will look a lot better when you build it, because you do need both, right? Different levels of different organizations with different scale, both matter. But if you had to pick which one you're building first, I think the bet has to go to building out the team and the knowledge first.
Yeah, and on top of that, Lance, you and I have talked about this at great depth, but it's a matrix of your technical as well as your business-minded individuals, and having business, build out the value proposition in where you want to go. Defining that finish line is a huge step. I've seen time and time, teams be assembled with either too many business individuals and they rely on external parties too often, or on the same side that they have not enough business people that they don't know how to extract the value as well. So there's definitely a balance there of that squad. And, that's something that as this evolves, especially in the CPG space, it's going to require much more niche skill sets to address that demand.
Yeah, Lance, do you agree with that? I mean, what do you think makes up that dream team? Justin mentioned the business and technical acumen, but what else do you think, what skill sets are really needed for that team?
I think the curiosity and being you can't be intimidated by the data. You don't have to be the expert. I always say that the best teams are actually multidisciplinary. It's not that the business person is trying to be the junior data scientist and they're trying to do someone else's role, but they're curious and they're partnered up across expertise, so that the learning and the application happen, and you get that curiosity to use and apply the data into that test and learn, test and validate, test and measure kind of spectrum. Again, if you've got business people that just want I call it prove me right analytics. If you just want the one shiny PowerPoint for your performance appraisal, that's not really a great application of the tech. But if you're trying to uncover that consumer demand, the channel partnership, that's where the power of the data and the power of the consumer start to win in your org.
And you think of an analogy would be like a sports team. So we just had the Super Bowl a couple days ago. If we had 11 quarterbacks in the field, that would be a pretty boring game to watch. You have to think every position has a different skill set that supports other positions, and having that balanced approach. But a lot of times you just have to understand where the pieces fit into that puzzle, because it's definitely an art form of building that team out and as well.
And that's where all the buzzword agile and all the other buzzword waterfall and agile and everything in between, right? Tech doesn't thrive when they're given specs and say go off, build and report back. They thrive on that relationship, the partnership, through a project, through the creation of a business, of a new route to market, of a new product, not just at the onset and the end. There's always going to be a role for agencies and experts and kind of forward-thinking leaders, but that partnership is invaluable as you build a data-driven business.
Great. All right, Justin, we're going to get into how we use AI and ML in this equation as well. So Justin, using this data, how do you think the role of AI and ML can shape the CPG industry? And given the pressure of digital convenience, how do you foresee brands deploying these models successfully?
This is a loaded question, and it's two questions in one. So I will try to break it up as best I can. Historically, when we think of CPG leading up to until 3 to 4 years ago, we had only statistical third-party data sets that were mentioned earlier that we would say we have rough transactions from grocers, retailers, and as a CPG brand, we do our best to put it all together to understand not only market basket, but seasonality, but zero, consumer insight. There's some elements of how many people are in a home and things like that. There are organizations that try to append to this third-party data, like we talked about in the last question, of understanding what their preferences are. But if you understand someone that buys a certain type of soup, but also is really into sports, that narrows it down to about 70 million people in the country. So there's a lot of issues in how do you break that down and drive value. On top of the traditional CPG, the pandemic completely, we had to escalate things much faster from a digital perspective. And a lot of the direct consumer plays that were on some of the larger CPG brands probably got put to the front of the line, because this was an opportunity that people are at home, and capturing that zero-party data that we mentioned earlier is really at a heightened point in time. But then also that data has never really been available to CPG brands. And then conversely, on the other side of CPG brands that are relatively new, they're actually going the opposite path. So you think of Allbirds and Warby Parker are very successful direct-to-consumer brands. They're actually opening up retail stores. And the reason why they're doing that is because, one, they could help eliminate some of the pain points in returns and supply chain, but at the same time, they now have so much rich data on their consumers that now they know where to open stores, they know where to have real-time promotions, and that geographic data is complete gold. And being able to leverage that of saying, hey, we understand that our shirts and our pants are a new product line. Well, since they have a retail-based sector in their company, they can leverage that much faster as a CPG brand. As we think about AI and ML, really the two things that stick out to me in a CPG perspective is segmentation and personalization. So as that direct-to-consumer data gets more rich, we're going to be able to personalize not just emails and promotions, but just offer products that that will buy much faster than they would if they were more generic. And then segmentation, as different people are involved in touching with the brands and the CPGs themselves, they need to understand where they are in the customer lifecycle. And as CPGs actually get access to that data, they can deploy different marketing tactics that will be able to help people that are in different sectors, whether they're onboarding a new customer, whether they're trying to engage with people that have just heard of them. Those require very different marketing efforts to do that. And I'm really excited where the CPG space is right now, is that we're just starting to see some of that. And as far as deploying models, there's a term called ML ops that's, relatively new, but the one thing to take away from that comment is we have to look at, as we make predictions around certain segments to personalize offers, we need to make sure that we're not being prejudiced towards certain groups as well. So being able to tie that out of saying, is this a biased recommendation? Is it relying on a stereotype? From a deep learning and AI perspective, that's going to be a much more prevalent topic as things evolve, because we want to make sure that we're obviously having high tactical availability, but we never want to over generalize and over stereotype on certain demographics and groups. So that's really where we're going to have a lot more data interoperability, data interpretability, AI ethics as well is going to start becoming more and more. But these CPGs are hiring those specific skill sets and that talent. So that's really great to see. But overall, we need to find a way of balancing giving data, but without being too invasive in marketing tactics as well. Lance, that was a lot. But when you think of, traditional car lot pricing and demand forecasting, as General Mills looks at doing predictions on now starting to get that individual customer data, have you seen them being able to extrapolate that to more of the traditional CPG sectors that a lot of the brands like refrigerated baked goods and cereal offer?
Yeah, I think all brands have that opportunity. And as you think about developing that, and as media channels and offer channels and coupon channels have all split, there's not just 3 TV networks anymore. People aren't just getting their promotions from their Sunday newspaper flyer and coupons. And so bringing those pieces together to drive your business, not just, the old adage, stack them high and let it fly, kind of still sometimes, as you got these old retail partnerships and an old mindset of, if you just put it in one place, they'll come. If you build the display, they will come. I don't think that's particularly efficient, and it's not, certainly given the supply realities. It's also not, so it's not how consumers are shopping, and it's not really how retailers are executing either. And so finding those ways to build your business, data informed, data enriched, and then turn it back into cultivating that relationship can be a winning formula for CPG and retail partnerships.
It's a double-edged sword with, You see name brand CPG products that stores sell. Amazon's been called out for a very popular product, and then they have an Amazon Basics competitor to that as well. So there's definitely a copycat methodology that really erodes the price and promotion strategy at the coupon level to drive customers in. And it's a delicate game, and the pandemic has just further put more digital transformation needs on these CPGs to evolve, for sure.
Justin, I think that was a perfect segue. Actually, we got a question around Amazon. So the question is, how can a CPG company compete with the price wars with Amazon, given that it's price sensitive, but also loyalties are challenged at every occasion? So how do you compete with that?
You want to take that one, Lance? Otherwise, I can take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about building your value proposition. Having consumers know what they're going to get with inflation and with the way consumers are going to be considering their purchases. There's going to be a temptation to trade down, but waste and failure is a bigger threat. So if you've got your value proposition right, you kind of have to trust it and lean in. You can't have that gap be too big, but it ends up coming back to, does the product fulfill the need, and does the value proposition work? And if you don't understand both of those sides, that's where the next learning has to come.
Yeah, and to kind of tack on to that, when I have been in more traditional consulting engagements from an analytics perspective, I try to find what's called a moat. So what is the one group that understands your value proposition and that is a reliable source of revenue for the CPG brand? So as you evolve beyond that, keeping core to your product mission. So if you look at things like ingredients, or certain new evolvement in technology like meatless meat and things like that, being able to find that core customer segment that understands your value proposition, and then finding new and creative ways to scale that as well. But as far as price wars goes, everything will go to zero, and it's finding a way to create your value proposition and a market differentiator. Obviously, every industry that has a CPG inside of it has different problems, and that's largely due to the consumer profile, the price point, how readily available it is. But then also we have to think about brick and mortar competition versus e-com competition as well. And there's a very fine balance with a lot of that, but I still go back to understanding the core segment, like Lance said, and building on top of your value proposition as well.
So if I can jump in and
Yeah.
a point of view as well about Amazon. I would argue that CPGs in particular have let Amazon win. Amazon has not won by chance. And what I mean by that is that they have not had a lot of good control over their distribution, and Amazon tends to have the biggest assortment. So, if whoever online has the biggest assortment and has the best price and is able to ship products within a day or two, of course you're going to win. So if you want to win and compete, you need to be selective about who gets what product. And every single item that is available shouldn't be available on marketplaces. If you want your DTC site to do well, you probably need to hold back a few key SKUs for that DTC site. Part of the success of these marketplaces is also because they rely on your loose distribution. So your distributors, your salespeople are out there just pushing as many units as they can. And there's all kinds of high-low pricing out there in physical retail. And there are retail arbitrageurs who will go and get everything they can at the low prices with the intent to resell that merchandise on marketplaces. So if you don't want that to happen, you need to lobby for laws to get changed. And there are actually laws right now in Congress that are being proposed to put more regulations and restrictions around sellers so that they do have to be authorized by you if they are going to sell on marketplaces, because right now they don't have to be. And marketplaces have used this to their advantage because they can, all they have to do is get the merchandise. It doesn't need to be legal or authorized. So that's issue one. The second is that CPGs need to think about omni-channel the way that the rest of the retail industry has been thinking about omni-channel for the last 2 decades. And what that means is omni-channel is about rethinking the distribution of your goods for the purpose of e-commerce. Right now, all CPG DTC is putting a box in a box and shipping it to somebody's home. That is a disaster. That is not a formula for success. That is not going to be done profitably. But if you rethink the supply chain, you rethink the fact that you already have a truck probably every day already going to every major account, what is the downside of mixing some of those pallets with some of those DTC items? What is the cost of that? Isn't that probably a little bit more cost effective than putting a box in a box and sending it via FedEx to somebody's house? Because that's what needs to happen, and that's what is not yet happening. So if you rethink that, like, people are already going to stores. You don't need to be shipping things to people's homes. Like, there's like a Kroger or a Walmart, like a mile from everybody's house in this country anyway. Use that to your advantage, while at the same time capturing the transaction digitally so that, you can get that data, but then partnering with some of these other companies. I mean, heck, even people will tell us in surveys, they're happy to pick up transactions at Starbucks, so you leverage the network of commercial distribution facilities that are already there that shoppers already go to every day.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to shift into our last question for today. So let's take a look at the trends that will shape the CPG industry in 2022 and beyond. So Lance, what's next for CPG companies after the digital transformation experienced in 2020 and 2021, especially considering how much choice consumers have today?
Yeah, I think, the change isn't done. I think there's new patterns and new paths to market, both for brands and for consumers to purchase. And so staying on top of that as the new economy kind of continues to evolve, using your data to reduce the friction in that purchase, but also to meet unmet demands, highlighting the opportunities and not just the cost. If your data is a cost and not a strategic asset, that's just an old mindset that needs to go away. And so how can your data actually inform your growth and not just be an admin cost center? The winners are going to figure out those new patterns using their consumer knowledge from the data and from the history of their brands. I think brands that stay familiar and stay relevant are going to be trusted as the new normal emerges.
Great. Sucharita, did you want to add anything to that as well?
If I were to look back at, kind of the big trends that are changing, I've heard more talk about retailer media networks than anything, and that is going to affect all of the CPG industry because they are the ones that are seen as the companies that are going to basically fund these retailer media networks. And the large multi-category grocers in particular, but also mass merchants are the ones that are all launching these programs. And this is all a response at this moment in time to the death of the cookie and the waning ability to use third-party data. And retailers are wanting to take advantage of their zero and first party data, and they would love to marry it with the brand data that is the brand data that brands are going to hopefully be gathering over time with their own zero and first party data. So it is an interesting ecosystem. It's an interesting evolution of digital marketing. It may break the duopoly of Google and Facebook and finally give both brands and retailers an opportunity to reach shoppers in new ways and new innovative ways. I really think that the true power of it, though, because right now a lot of it is being perceived pretty narrowly within the scope of just retail websites. But the true power is also to bring it to the physical store. And you see a little bit of that with solutions like Walmart Connect. There are companies out there like Cooler Screens that are experimenting with like the refrigerated, kind of sections of stores like Walgreens. But those are some of the experiments that I'd like to see further expanded upon that will, I think, really unlock some value here and showcase the power of data and ultimately drive sales for CPG companies.
Great. Jim, do you want to open up questions or did you want to add anything to that?
Well, let me ask a couple questions that are out there, and we've got about a little less than 10 minutes left. But on the subject of Sucharita, you just mentioned top line sales. I mean, there's the obvious metrics and KPIs for any brand selling something, but are there KPIs specific for CPG companies trying to go direct to consumer? Are there any advice you have on how to measure success or not success? Any one of you, if you can chime in. Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got an opinion on KPIs, metrics of success?
I would say making KPIs that are actionable. So it's not going to do you a lot of good when a KPI tells you yesterday's news. There is a lot of love and hate with dashboarding and KPIs. So making sure that KPIs are built in a manner that you have the ability of driving change from that. So saying something happened last month, but then not only showing that there was a dip, but that's where some of the machine learning elements could come in, is that it actually can be prescriptive enough that I actually could tell the user what's actually going on behind the scenes. Well, your top line revenue dropped by 2%, but your largest customers stayed the same. It was your bottom 10% of your customers that dropped their ordering. So having a little bit more teasing from the KPIs that provide a actionable metric. Time and time again, I see KPIs that don't have the value because they're not tracked. And they typically follow whatever executive leadership decides on that KPIs. And if there's turnover, those KPIs change. So making sure that things are consistent, and there's a term called Conway's Law that KPIs and definitions follow the organization that defines them. And that definitely follows through, and making sure that everyone has the North Star to guide the business.
Another question out in the Q&A is related to a direct-to-consumer model. So the question is, there are different D2C working models like subscription commerce, social commerce. Any advice on how to decide which model works better than another, or any comments on that question?
Sorry, I'm back. It's for some reason my Zoom keeps crashing, so apologies to everybody for that. This is where test and learn is crucial, and there's not going to be one single solution for every portfolio of brands. There's not going to be a single solution for every single product. There are going to be certain products that are going to be better suited for subscriptions than others. There are going to be things like new product launches that typically do really well for social commerce, or limited edition products, or drops that kind of CPG actually can be really well suited for social commerce. So experiment, do it all. The direct-to-consumer website itself is often great for extended aisle products that are about to be discontinued. Those are there. So kind of testing, piloting, and trying all kinds of things is important. And I know that we had asked a question about KPIs. I think that kind of there for CPGs, you do need to be a little bit more creative than just sales or margin. You also want to be looking at, kind of the number of customers that you now have in your file, the number of email addresses that you are collecting. There are different approaches to looking at data, and it needs to be more than just how many units are you pushing out the door. A lot of CPGs are looking at higher ticket items. If there are opportunities to sell electronic versions of whatever it is, like, if you're selling a toothbrush or, kind of some higher end version of what it is that you're selling. And in that world, you're not going to be selling a ton of units, but it could be about lifetime value of that customer. And are you able to kind of engage shoppers in some of these new categories that you may not have been able to do in physical stores before?
And the important adjacencies, right? Like Warby Parker has been in contacts for the last year after focusing solely on glasses for a long time as a focus area for them. But broadening out that, there's some consumers that wouldn't consider them because glasses aren't their thing. Those adjacencies and building those relationships further, keeping those consumers, but also then adding to the assortment can be critical for staying relevant and scale.
One quick thing to add on here, and this is a whole nother webinar topic on itself, so I will be choiceful in my words, but you cannot get into any of the advanced new technologies like metaverse. It's very without understanding a direct consumer model. You have to really get the basics down before you dump tons of marketing effort. Brands that have had success like Adidas or Nike, for example, they have 20 years of unbelievably rich customer lifetime metrics before they've made those pitches. And it's also from a retail and also from a fashion-based industry, it makes sense. But I think that there's a lot of misconfusion. It reminds me of the term cloud 10 years ago. Everyone said it and everyone was afraid that someone is going to come hack into their computer and steal their identities. And it was a fear-based mechanism. And I see a lot of that coming in this new iteration of this. But just as a call out to make sure you understand a solid direct consumer channel relationship before investing in some of the newer frontier technology right now.
Perfect. Well, I think we've reached the end, right on time. Let me first of all thank Lance and Justin and Sucharita for your participation.